Well, thanks for being with us here on Morning Live. South Africa's COVID-19 response fund is marred by corruption ranging from overpricing of badly needed supplies of personal protective equipment to the stealing of food parcels meant for the poor by those tasked to distribute it, amongst other issues. Now, the sizable disposable funds meant to fight this pandemic and, more importantly, save the lives of those who may be at risk have opened up high proportions of looting and exploitation, it would seem. And cited as the most unequal society in the world and now ranked as the world's fifth highest country with coronavirus infections, South Africa's poorest citizens have been dealt a double blow. Now, as cases of corruption increase, law enforcement is obviously tasked to do their bit, but are they doing enough to deal with this deepening state of theft and rampant corruption that we are seeing? Advocate Rodney de Kock is the Deputy National Director of Public Prosecutions, and he joins us now to discuss these matters. Advocate de Kock, welcome to Morning Live. Thanks for your time.
Thank you very much for inviting me, Sakina.
Advocate de Kock, the anti-corruption unit was established with the express purpose of expediting, prosecuting and the sentencing of those involved in illegal activity related to COVID-19. But perhaps we should start by looking at its composition in terms of who has oversight of it and how exactly is it comprised.
Yes, thank you very much. The unit you refer to is an approach of coordination between the various law enforcement agencies with this responsibility in the country to work together in terms of dealing with this very, very serious matter. And so what we have done is we've centralized the location of officials who are seized with dealing with these matters on a daily basis. And we have adopted an intelligence approach to understand where incidents are occurring so that we can speedily investigate and then prosecute where there's sufficient evidence to prosecute. What is a critical component of the approach is our positioning of our asset recovery, our asset forfeiture units, so that when we identify transactions in bank accounts, suspicious transactions in bank accounts, we're able to move immediately to freeze those accounts and to retrieve the money on behalf of the state. So those in broad terms is the approach to understanding this issue and to dealing with it from a law enforcement perspective.
So we are 4 months into this lockdown now, Advocate de Kock. How far along has your unit come in terms of prosecuting any cases? Can you give us a progress report to date, please?
Well, the approach and the coordination was set up about 2 months ago. We have 42 incidents that have been reported to the center. There are currently 11 investigations. So what that means is there is sufficient evidence of a reasonable suspicion that corruption has occurred. We currently have 3 cases on our court rolls, and we have preservation orders of 3.5 million. So what is important to understand from that picture is that before you would never have had cases on court rolls. We already have cases on court rolls, and we've adopted this approach only over a 2-month period. So that is it. We are dependent on society. We're dependent on ethical behavior by officials. We are dependent on people reporting incidents, and the minute that information is received, a team of people are looking at it. The difference is that we are now coordinating our efforts, and we're making sure that every incident is being investigated.
So, looking at what you've just said to us, those 3 cases that are already on the court rolls, what do they relate to?
Well, those cases would have related to the one matter is the matter of the UIF funds that was unlawfully siphoned off. So they all relate to funding, cases involving funding for the COVID-19 response, where money is unlawfully channeled through various procurement irregularities.
And does this include the food parcels situation? Because that was one of the earlier instances that were picked up and reported. Has any of that been referred to you?
Yes, those cases, remember, this process started in the early part of the year already, before the establishment of the Fusion Center. So there's about 50 of these food parcel cases that are already on court rolls throughout the country. But we're not counting those ones into these figures. These are only the figures that we are using from the establishment of the Fusion Center. And those cases are now being dealt with in our various regions by the directors of public prosecutions and the various police agencies in the regions. But going forward, all those cases will also now be referred to the Fusion Center.
So with regard to the centres, the units that have been specifically set up to deal with COVID-19 related corruption, perhaps just talk to us about exactly what it is that you do and how it operates.
Look, Sakina, one wouldn't want to talk too much about the operational detail. So I think what is important for us all to remember is that the various agencies with different responsibilities are now working in a collaborative way. So as you know, prosecutors are dependent on evidence. And evidence means that investigators must take statements, do forensic analysis, and this is then converted so that we can present cases to courts. So prosecutors are involved to ensure that as these investigations unfold, that the evidence that we collect, that's credible evidence. And when we make an evaluation of whether there's sufficient evidence to prosecute, that this is now being done at an early stage. And so we've got the WARCs who investigate priority crimes, and all these cases are being investigated by the WARCs, irrespective of what the value involved is. So that shows the importance of it, because we've got our main investigating agency in the country seized with these matters. And now we've got the prosecutors working closely with them. But then we also have other intelligence agencies that's operating and that's feeding information on a daily basis to the investigators and the prosecutors. So this is what I talk about when I say it's intelligence-driven and it's intelligence-led. We also have our colleagues in the banks and our colleagues in the various law enforcement agencies that deals with early identification of suspicious transactions, looking at all of these issues. So that's broadly the operational model. And as you can hear, the question is always going to be, how effective are we bringing all of those pieces together so that we can get a clear understanding of who's committing what offences in terms of the space.
But with regard to these units that were specially set up to deal with COVID-19 related corruption, for example, you speak about the entities, the Hawks, the NPA, the SIU. These are not new. They are already existing in the entities with already existing infrastructure and resources. And the understanding is that these units are set up to expedite the prosecution of COVID-19 related corruption and theft, whatever the case may be. So yes, when we say it is meant to expedite, I think in the mind of the lay public, we are expecting to see swift justice, not what we have become accustomed to, where it seems to drag on forever. And when you say to us you've had 42 cases referred, 3 on the court rolls. So at this stage, it may be faster than usual, but it just doesn't seem to be fast enough for the lay public looking on.
Yes, no. So I said that there were 40 incidents So when you read an article in the newspaper or on Facebook, and there's an allegation that someone has committed corruption or has acted unlawfully, that would be an incident. So that is immediately picked up and it's referred. So that's very important because traditionally that wouldn't happen. We would wait until there's a complaint. So we're not waiting for a complaint. We're scanning everything, the media, public information, official information. The SIU has a general proclamation to go into any government department just on a suspicion that someone is committing an unlawful act. So those are the incidents. Currently, out of those incidents, 11 have been converted to investigation. So it means that we found an incident and then our immediate initial investigation suggests that there is wrongdoing, criminal wrongdoing. Now an investigation must take place. The difference is that there's urgency in terms of collating and collecting evidence, and it takes time. For us to prepare a proper prosecution in our country with our constitutional imperatives and the way our Criminal Procedure Act works, we need to be able to collect that evidence. So we're working on 11 cases already, and as I said, 3 of those cases, the prosecution decided that there's sufficient evidence that we have already collected in order to enroll those cases. So that is substantial improvement in terms of how we traditionally would have done this. The fourth critical element is the dedicated resources that we are now putting into this. So in all of our key agencies, we've identified people, not just at a national level, also at a regional level, that when we have sufficient evidence and we can then take cases to court, that the prosecutors are there, that the investigators are there, that everybody that's required to be able to deal with these cases are ready and able to take the case to court. In appropriate cases, where there's serious wrongdoing, the prosecution must also consider whether we will agree to bail or whether we will oppose bail. So there are going to be serious consequences for officials in particular who are working within the state that has an ethical responsibility not to ensure that this kind of behavior doesn't happen. That potentially, 1, they may be kept in custody pending a trial, and 2, on conviction, the state will certainly ask for long-term imprisonment. So that is our approach. And I think we need to be given the opportunity to continue to do the work. But the point I'm emphasizing is everybody is taking this very, very seriously.
With regard to some of the more high-profile cases within the public domain, Advocate de Kock, as you say, you were scanning everything. There is, of course, the Gauteng matter with regard to the Department of Health and the tenders that were issued there. And then you have in KwaZulu-Natal, for example, there was the issue of the blankets that were allegedly sold to the Department of Social Development at inflated prices. In the Eastern Cape, there was the issue of the scooters. So those are some of the more glaring ones. Are you at all investigating anything around those at the moment?
All of them are investigated, irrespective of where they come from, who's involved. Each and every matter is going to be investigated. And this is the approach, and we are very, very serious about this. We are sitting as senior leadership dealing with this issue on a daily basis, and all departments are committed. Whether it's going to be a DG, whether it's going to be a low-level official that's involved, everybody, when we have sufficient evidence to take cases to court, to arrest, to take people to court, that is going to happen. And I promise you, that is what the prosecution's intention is with us.
So at this point, what are some of the barriers that you are dealing with, some of the challenges with regard to your investigations and, of course, bringing those matters to court speedily?
Well, we haven't received from our operational hub, we haven't received any indication that there are barriers at the moment. There are no obstacles to our work. Traditionally, we have challenges with the forensic investigations in complex matters, and we will see. But most of these matters, when it deals with the issue of payments, they are quite straightforward in terms of understanding the investigation. As soon as you identify that money has been spent in a particular way, it's easy then to track that. And that is why it's so critical that the banks are on board and that our agencies that deals with suspicious transactions are on board. So with that kind of collaborative approach, we don't face the normal problems that we face with complex financial investigations. So in a nutshell, we don't have any information that there are particular obstacles at this point in time to our investigations. Should we receive that information, we will look at it and we will certainly have to unblock whatever challenges we identify going forward.
Well, and perhaps just a final question. With the lockdown, how has this affected the rest of the cases that the NPA had been dealing with already? Because one would imagine that there would be updates on how far you have come. So can you just give us a sense of how this lockdown has impacted your work, Advocate de Kock?
In a substantial impact on the functioning of the courts. As you know, during the first level 5 of the lockdown, effectively courts were not proceeding with criminal cases. So there is a backlog that is increasing. So we are now organizing ourselves as the prosecutors to be able to do this effectively. But we are still during a lockdown period, and so the courts are not fully effective. We've also had infections at various court buildings, even at police stations, at prosecution offices. And all of this, of course, impacts on the work of the criminal justice system. But we are doing our best. We have put measures in place to ensure that we can continue to do the work as expected of us by the country and by the Constitution.
Advocate Rodney de Kock, thanks for your time. Deputy National Director of Public Prosecutions, Rodney de Kock, for responding to questions raised about the effectiveness of government institutions that are supposed to act on corruption amid the blatant looting of COVID-19 funds. And that brings us to news time, 8 o'clock, latest news update with Leanne.